All right, welcome back to another episode of the Conviction Fiction, where real stories meet real change. I'm your host, Antoine Rivers, and today we're joined for this episode by a powerful voice, someone whose journey reflects both the struggle and strength of reentry. Now, Michael is a returning citizen who got involved with Common Good Atlanta, a transformative program connecting Georgia's incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals to college classrooms. Now, while working full time, Michael is also completing his bachelor's degree at Kennesaw State. I just found that out over at Kennesaw State
Yep.
and using his life experience to help others change their narrative. Now, we're going to dive deep into the impact of incarceration, the power of education, and how media sometimes continues to glorify trauma without seeing the whole picture. All right. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get ready for the Conviction Fiction. All right, we're back. Now, I was giving the intro because we know that there are people who walk out of prison and kind of fade off into the background. And then there are people like you, Michael, who come home with the fire to rebuild, not just for yourself, but like others. Tell us about just what was the beginning of your journey?
So it was kind of a interesting situation. I got introduced to Common Good of Atlanta through a good friend of mine, and it was one of those things. We both, oddly enough, we'd run into each other or met each other in two separate camps, which again, very unusual. So it's kind of like one of those fortuitous things. And we both met each other. The last camp we met was also the same place that we ended up paroling out of. So, very, really strong connection there. We're both very much on the same page, like, trying to get into higher education, stuff like that. And, initially when I got out, I just like anyone, like you don't really know, kind of want to live life a little bit, kind of want to get back into the swing of things,
Right.
yourself a little bit, like pay par for the course. So just being honest, I don't know if like reentry was something at the forefront of my mind at the time. Now, where it eventually rolled into was, I got to working with Common Good and I saw kind of what they were offering, and kind of like a background story where that really kind of opened my eyes to the travails that everyone's going to have getting out of prison, because it's it's there. It's until it smacks you in the face you don't realize like how prevalent it is.
Yeah.
When I was trying to re-enroll back into college, so before I left, I was going to college at a local school.
Mhm.
When I got out, there was a lot of things that were playing out that I thought were playing in my favor. So the person who was over admissions at that college was like a good friend of my aunt's, and she worked up in North Carolina. So again, a lot of situations we're looking at it from 10,000 feet up. I'm like, okay, so this should be a surefire case.
Fire. But let's go back to that first day you were released, though. If you can remember back to that first day, what was going through your mind when you stepped outside of those gates?
So when I came home, I paroled out at a Atlanta Transitional Center. So I had been kind of the nature of that, the TCs is you get to, if you're working, you have a job, stuff like that, you got to still reside at the TC every night. So my coming home story was maybe not as glamorous in a sense because because I was working, I was able to go home once a week to see my family. So that was the whole concept of the TC, where you kind of had a gradual reintegration back into your normal everyday life. And so for me, when I came home, when I got released, of course you get the inevitable like weight of the world lifted off your shoulders, right? So that's going to happen. You feel, again, just like it's a weird sensation because, for me, and again, I'm maybe there's a handful of people I know who kind of shared this sentiment where you don't feel like you're actually free. And so it takes like a good, like few weeks and like before you're like, okay, I think I'm good. Like, I think I'm actually home.
You're walking on eggshells. You're like, okay, it's going to be count time in a minute now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I used to make the joke. I'm like, I swear I'll probably come back home and do my laundry in the sink, have it hanging up on like a clothespin across the bathroom. It's just like whatever.
People are going to walk in and like, what the hell is he
Oh
doing?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what's
Like
going
I
on?
mean, hey, it's a quick and easy way, And
Great. But
um,
during those first few weeks, there are always emotional and mental adjustments that you had to make. If you could identify one primary adjustment that you had to make, since you were living with someone, what would that have been? Like, what was the biggest emotional or mental adjustment you had to make?
for me, I'd say there's maybe one big one for sure was just getting used to social settings. Now, in a weird way, I came out right before COVID. So I get out the day before 2020. Let me think, the day before New Year's Eve of 2019. So right before COVID happened. So I got home, got to kind of hang out with a little bit, like small groups of friends, nothing too crazy. Like I just knew my system. I was not ready for anything like that. And where it got, a little bit nerve wracking for me is, when we did actually go out to big settings, if it was like a concert or a party or, whatever it is, where you're surrounded by a bunch of people that you're not familiar with. It was a weird thing that I just did not expect. And it kind of catches you off guard because, again, what am I doing? I'm just kind of the guy sitting in the corner that's like, I just don't
Yeah.
want to interact with people.
Yeah, so many lights. It's a lot of stuff going on. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff is going on because coming home isn't always like a celebration. Sometimes it's a storm of emotions. I know that's one of the issues I had, especially with crowds.
Yeah.
It's like, are they talking about? Do they? I like what's going on?
Yeah.
There's fear, hope, confusion, pressure, all at once. And in this segment, basically, you were taking us back to those first days, and that's what we wanted to talk about. Those first days of freedom and the invisible weight that many of us carry when we walk back into the world.
Yeah.
This is where the real work begins. So that's what we're going to get into, the real work. Right. So since coming home, after you did that, let's talk about something that's become a central part of your life, and that's education. Okay. And specifically the Common Good in Atlanta. Now, how did you first learn about Common Good Atlanta, and what pulled you in?
So my buddy Patrick, he had introduced me. This is the individual who I'd run into twice. So he got out maybe 2 or 3 weeks before me. I got out again. We both left the same transitional center, and he had reached out maybe a few weeks after, and just touch base. Just, hey, how's it going? How you doing? What do you got going on? And that's where I started the conversation with him about getting back into school, and that's where it kind of, me thinking I had a golden opportunity and I could get in on my own, was like, I don't need, and not even in a stubborn line. I was just like, I know somebody who works in administration who is over admissions. I'm like, I got like kind of a good setup, and then it smacked me in the face. I'm like, he denied me outright twice. Then I filed an appeal, deny that. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I don't really.
Rude awakening.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, it's like I also had credits with the school, so I'm like, you guys know I worked here, or I went here, I did really good. Now I'm gone, and kind of like, it's kind of one of those got smacked in the face. So that's where he started the conversation with me with, hey, would you consider trying Common Good? He gave him the whole rundown. It's post incarceration, helping with higher education, kind of the whole 9 yards. And I got into it. Again, this is kind of right in the middle of COVID, so everything that we did was virtual.
Right.
Which is fine. Still, like, honestly, they were able to have a very high quality class, even in the virtual settings. Before I left, I had never done online classes. It wasn't a streamlined process because I left in 2012. Yeah. So it was not a streamlined process. So
that had to have been tough. I don't mean to cut you off, but that had to have been tough, to be back in a college environment. First, you're out of prison. Now you're back in a college environment. And then on top of that, COVID, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
With that being said, what were some of the things that you went through? I mean, a lot of people were just adjusting with COVID, but you're out of prison and now going to college with students online. So
so I was in a weird, and I'm thankful at the situation I was in, because the job I had when I first got out, they dubbed us essential employees because, again, we're in distribution. So a lot of our customers were medical companies, like medical manufacturers. So with that, like obviously they needed us. We had parts that they need for respirators, which obviously went into COVID protocol, all that. So in a weird way, like I wasn't on lockdown. And then in Georgia, they did not have strict lockdown policies. I mean, like it was kind of within reason, but not as stringent as say like New York or any place like that. So,
Mhm.
because I got the essential employee kind of whatever the hat, if you will,
Mhm.
I was able to like leave my house every day and go to work, and not like I interact with a bunch of people. There's only 5 people at my office, so small time, but at least it I didn't feel the constraints of the lockdown, COVID lockdown, like probably a lot of my other friends and family did.
Mhm.
Um, so that's why my situation was a little bit different. Like I said, now we also didn't, there weren't any social gatherings like that for several months.
Right.
So that's why, like, even though I was in COVID, I didn't maybe feel it as bad as other people did. If that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. For those just not joining or who might not know, Coming Good Atlanta provides access to college education for people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated by connecting Georgia's colleges and professors with prison classrooms. They also believe that, and I agree with this, that broad democratic access to higher education strengthens the common good of our communities. Now, how do you think like programs like CGA are changing lives, not just for individuals, but for entire communities?
The one of the biggest things that I saw, not that I did like direct research, this is through me getting involved with other groups like GCHEB, Common Good, is there's the key word is recidivism. How do you prevent recidivism? And across the board, it's high. I don't care what state, what circuit, state, federal. Georgia's especially high. If the numbers I recall are still accurate, which again is just still high. So a lot of these groups, Come Good especially, it's the big elephant in the room. How do we fix that? Because if guys are coming home, girls and guys are coming home, and you're looking at a recidivism rate of like 50% within the first year, or I can't remember exactly, but it was astronomical.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Because obviously, like we know, the penal system's not doing anything to really prep us, if you will. If you want to say they have the TCs, but you don't have enough to support the population in prison in Georgia, at least. So there's no real help from the government institutions in place that are already giving us the punishment. You need something, and I'm tying all this to say one element that's been shown to really help improve recidivism rates is education. Obviously, along with that, maybe better legislation, maybe not so not as many harsh laws. True, but I think education ties into a deeper issue kind of across the board, because it also prevents it on the long haul. And obviously that's a
Yeah.
tough address too, because
Tough. Yeah,
yeah,
it's really tough because for some people, education is just degree, but for the formerly incarcerated, I mean, it could be the opportunity to sustain a living or have economic freedom and have maybe find your purpose
yeah,
through that. Um, for you and others like you, including myself, it's a lifeline. And through Common Good Atlanta, you're not just studying textbooks; you're studying for yourself, right?
oh yeah. I'll say that's one thing that, like, in a very unexpected way, I did not even think to consider this, but a lot of the classes Common Good offers a lot of liberal arts classes. So you're getting like philosophy, poetry, literature, some history classes. Those are just the ones I've taken. I know they have more, but just kind of those little snapshots. And the thing I did not expect is these are classes and these are teachers, professors who are in there, who are in a weird way forcing you to think for yourself. And why that's interesting, because that's something that I think the prison system takes away from a lot of people, is that not necessarily your ability or your right to think for yourself, but it's just your ability to kind of create that person, your own identity through those thoughts. It's the wildest things. I did not even consider that as is a reason why I would join a Common Good. But as I started partaking in these classes, and they have assignments like, hey, what are your thoughts on this painting? What are your thoughts on this piece of literature? What are your thoughts on this, this poem? You start reclaiming that identity that you maybe tucked away for so long in prison, and I don't know what you'd want to call that phenomenon, but it's something very much, at least for me, and I can't speak for everyone. For me, you hide that part of you. Not even that you're hide, you kind of it's you're in survival mode. I'm not thinking, oh, how do I like expand my content? And yes, you are doing that, but you're for the most part in survival mode. So you don't really have the time to sit there and really kind of flesh out like your inner character, if you will. And that's what Common Good opened my eyes to, which I did not expect. Yeah, so kind of a weird situation there, but
now, so imagine like you're juggling a full-time job, you got classes, you got bills now, Michael. Bills are there. And then on top of that, your past and your purpose all at once. Now that's a reality for a lot of returning citizens, including yourself and me. You know, we do that and we live this every day. Now, what we're talking about in this segment, guys, is what it means to survive the pressure, because there's a lot going on, and we're also want to highlight to the point to stay committed to your growth, your personal growth. Michael just mentioned you were talking about how prison sometimes desensitizes you, where like you're told what to do all the time. You don't really have your opinion really doesn't matter. You know, you need to just try to get up out of here. Right? Like I think you mentioned survival mode. It's like, hey, you're always on your toes. So while you're working full time and finishing up your degree, how do you manage the grind? Do you find time to go to concerts? How do you manage it?
You know, it's it's this cyclical effect, I guess. So when I came home, it was COVID. So I've been home now 5.5 years. When I came home, right in the middle of COVID. So it was, whether I wanted to or not, it was very much grind. It's just like, hey, nothing you can do. You're not really going to be able to travel. And I was also like fresh out. So I'm like, I doubt my PO would let me travel in between states. I didn't ask because obviously everything was shut down. But, so for that initial maybe year and a half was very much the grind mode. It came out of that, and maybe right before I got enrolled in school, like again, kind of had fun, whenever I went to the concerts, dating, all that, all the stuff that you would do as you're thinking about doing when you come home. And now it's kind of cycling, going full circle back into that grind mode of like, okay, like, have my fun, but now let me, settle down, focus, like quite literally. So, and I think another better way, I was actually oddly enough just talking about this to a friend of mine, for myself, and I'm sure for like a lot of people coming home, we don't have the luxury, unfortunately, to sit there and go on, a weekend trip, like out of country, out of state. I mean, sure, maybe some people do. I don't. I feel like most of my friends who are coming out probably are in a similar situation to myself, or, I have plenty of friends who never got incarcerated who are like, oh yeah, let's go, to Chicago for the weekend. I'm like,
you're like, what?
It must be nice. I wish I could, but I can't. It's just like, the bills and the legality of it, and me, making sure that my PO, like all these things, I'm like, I just can't. So for me, it kind of changed the landscape of, how you find your release, if you will. How do you, what's the equivalent to going to concerts? In concerts, that's easy enough, right? You can, hey, schedule if it's on a Thursday, Friday, that's not as crazy, but it's just like more of these, the jet setter lifestyle, right? People flying all over the place like that. Obviously, I can't live into that dream as it is right now. Hopefully down the future, but it changes, okay, what is my escape? And for me, it really dials down into finding the day-to-day activities you can do. So for me, exercise, reading, writing, kind of the key three. But like, honestly, oddly enough, what I was really doing when I was incarcerated to really get your mind off things, right?
Those same things.
Hey, it holds true. Everywhere, it's just exercise, you get the indoor, like there's enough research to show like that these are good ways to kind of get your mind off things, to really escape that reality, to escape, oh man, I got a test, or I got a big project I got to finish, like things like that. So finding that outlet in the day-to-day activities, I feel like honestly, in a weird way, a lot of people who were in prison have that little tidbit of knowledge that most people on the streets probably don't have.
Already, it's like ingrained in you.
Oh yeah, because you're not even thinking about it. You're like, I don't want to be here. I can't leave, but I can get away from it in a way, by reading, writing, and exercise.
Yeah, that's one of the days. Like you go when the yard was open, go get some exercise in. When it's locked down, grab a book, read something, write. Now, have there been moments recently, any moments recently, when you just stepped back and said, "Wow, uh, I've come a long way," or "Wow, I can't believe all of this is happening for me"?
There, there have been moments. I'll say it's not, maybe these earth-shattering, like, like you pan back in like the Hollywood movie, and the
Mhm.
guy's sitting there, head in hands, looking out at the sunset. Not quite that effect, but definitely ones where I'm like, wow, like it's been 5.5 years. Like, damn,
Yeah,
I just didn't realize, and every, anytime it happens, it's always like a different, uh, some sort of different trigger. It's not the best word, but something else that motivates that thought. And like I say, recently, I think it was, you know, um, just trying to remember the conversation I was having. Something along the lines like what I was just saying, where I was talking to a friend of mine about like, hey, how do you find your release? And I'm, here I am talking about, yeah, well, go and do this, exercise, like whatever. And then
mhm.
just thought back to like as I was working out at the gym around about that same time. I was like, wow, the fact that I used to go into a yard in the middle of like the Macon heat, high heat of summer, just getting
Oh my
absolutely
god!
scorched. Yeah, brutal. Yeah. Oh, and I just remember getting blisters on my hands and had a killer tan. But other than that, I'm like, oh yeah, that is not what I'm looking for. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Now
But
you said something powerful today, or actually in our initiative, you said something that I wanted to ask you about. You said that you wanted to help others through your experience, and that somehow the media and movies often kind of glorify the trauma and violence without showing the full picture. What exactly do you mean by that?
so
You
there's
just is it the tan?
yeah. No, there were there's a few, and again, I have a hard time really watching any shows that are based in prison or something like that. Like there's one or two, and like when I first got out, I remember the big one was 90 Days In. It was
Yeah,
one that was kind of based in I guess it was just supposed to be more like documentary or not documentary style, but like
almost reality show. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And watching it, I'm like, my brother was kind of laughing. I'm like, I don't want to watch this, the
yeah,
BS, and because I'm like, it just I don't know. Something I guess probably would rub me if I dive into the thought a little bit more. And
mhm.
there's that, and there's another movie that I watched, Shot Caller, which was actually like a pretty entertaining movie. But again, it's a guy. The gist of it: a guy gets into a car accident. He's drunk. His buddy dies. He goes to prison. And this is out in like California, I believe. And it's not it's a fictional story, but
Mhm.
gets looped in with the gangs, and all of a sudden he turns into like this giant gang member. Any one of these, like in the 90 days, I can't speak to great length about the 90 days things. I haven't seen like the full arc of it, but just like a little snippet I did see.
It's like this is enough. Like I don't
Yeah.
watch.
Well, like what gets me is I'm like, you guys are trying to paint this picture like everyone in here is bad, like just Billy Badass sort of thing. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I guarantee if this is a high security place, which I was in a few, didn't want to be there. I guarantee you're not going to see cameras. I guarantee you're not going to see the violence because like it's not how it operates. Like
Right.
nothing about this is true to what's actually happening. On the flip side of things, I also, kind of the qualm I have with, media, Hollywood, like whatever. It's, how many people are telling like the stories you're trying to tell through people who are jumping on your podcast. I'm like, nothing in the media is doing that, right? You don't have like a full, or maybe there are new shows out there. Again, I don't try to find them because I've just
Yeah.
had enough of experiences where I'm like, it just rubs me the wrong way. And even like with the movie
Right.
Shot Caller, I'm like, you're literally, and what the last kind of beef I'll have with it is you're painting this picture as if some guy can go from regular everyday life,
Mhm.
goes to prison, and now he's turning into like this rabid animal who's running gangs, killing people.
Yeah.
That does nobody any sort of good who's coming out of prison because now, anyone, let's just take an average employee or employer. If they watch the movie, not to say obviously there's no direct one to one there, but
Right.
it paints this picture like anyone who's been in prison must be this wild animal who's uncontrollable, who's just killing
Yeah.
people left and
Do
right. I'm
you
like,
remember the main character on that movie? The
he,
shot caller.
I don't
Is
know his name. He was on Game of Thrones.
okay. Okay.
Um,
Because
yeah,
my point was like if someone saw that show and they checked the box, right?
Yeah.
They check the box. They go into an employee who has witnessed the show. There's like, oh, I have Mr. Shot Caller here. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's like, and this is where it kills me because the vast majority of people who are coming home don't want to go back. The vast majority of people who are coming home want to live a good, honest lifestyle, want to have a job, want to support their family. Obviously, you're going to get both ends of that spectrum. Who some guys just want to live gang lifestyle, like whatever, just criminal ways, can't get past it. Small snippet of the entire population. Most people
right?
don't want to go back,
And
and so
even those people, those hardened ones that you say like gang members and stuff, they'll say like, "Hey, I really don't want to do this."
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like they will hit a threshold. They're like, I'm done. Like, and
I'm
there's
done.
plenty of those stories. Where like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like,
Right
and that's
now,
where it just doesn't do anybody that's coming out any sort of justice.
all right, what do you think would be a more complete, more human portrayal of people impacted by incarceration? What would that look like? Like, what would it look like?
I think a good start, honestly, is podcasts like your own. Like, that's a great first step. With respect to something like media, like Hollywood movies. Hollywood
Yeah.
movies. Let's just say
Storytelling, yeah.
storytelling. Yes, if it would be maybe a movie that covers the full arc of that person, of the person who's like, look, I messed up, or maybe even go further and say, hey, this person, was born and raised in a gang lifestyle, went to prison, came back, it's like, I'm done. Like, and if you can show the full arc of that and say, no, just because you go to prison doesn't mean you're turning into this uncontrollable member of society or potential member of society. Is just like, no, like there are people who still have emotions, who still have family, who still want to live a life, who want to, live till they're 80 with grandkids. Like the fact that they're, like Shot Caller, it ends the guys in max lockdown.
Sure.
That's how it ends. And you're just like,
Typical.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, this isn't how it ends for 99% of the population in prison. This is not how it ends. So
yeah, we know that the media, they love our mug shots, but they never show our milestones. The trauma is consumed, but the triumphs, they're pretty much ignored.
yeah.
And I enjoy the conversation because I don't enjoy the conversation on the podcast because we try to speak truth to power about what it feels like to have the story distorted and why telling the whole truth, like you said, that overarching thing is how we start changing the game. So that was powerful stuff, and it's long overdue for the mass majority of people.
Yeah. I'm like the only other, sadly enough, the only other like full arc story I can possibly think of, just off the top of my head, was like, and it doesn't end well. It's the Green Mile, because the guy who, and I don't remember all the details, but it's like the guy who was like the good guy ends up still getting.
Yeah, he redeemed himself totally, and he was like, okay, let's still make this walk. Which is crazy. Which is crazy.
Yeah, that's the one. I'm like, I can't think. And again, not that I dive into all of the different movies out there or forms of storytelling, but I'm like, I don't know of a single movie or anything out there in which it portrays that full arc of like, okay, you can have a happy ending after you come home. Like, unfortunately, and I guess we're kind of writing the script here, and as individuals doing it, I guess,
I guess I think this is what we're doing. Now, for those people that have yet to experience coming home, say for instance, someone just came home this week, right? And they're feeling lost. What's the first thing that you would tell them to do?
I would honestly ask them to reach out to Common Good. Only reason being is because that is one of the greatest communities I've come across of post-incarcerated individuals. You have a group of professors and a group of alumni and a group of current students who are just getting out too, or even students who are still incarcerated. The sense of community that they've built there, I have not seen in too many other places, aside from like your own family, stuff like that. And why I say that is because, immediately the people who run the whole program, they are there to help. Whether they can, obviously not everyone can give a car away or find you an apartment, but just knowing that you have that kind of sense of belonging, it's almost one of the more vital aspects of coming home, especially if you don't have, if you're walking out to nothing. That's where it becomes, my situation is very different. I did have family I was able to get a job fairly quickly because my dad was good friends with a guy who owned a company. So
Mhm.
my situation was very different, but even still, like the sense of community, like obviously you have your family and friends, family probably more so because a lot of friends tend to go away whenever you're incarcerated.
Right.
But having that another community outside of that family, outside of your family,
Yeah.
rare to come by, and it's special because you don't. It's not something you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to go join, here, 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 and then they should have that. And like, it's not something you can just read the script and be like, oh yeah, it looks like they got a good community. Or it's like once you're fully immersed, you're like, okay,
Mm.
I feel
Let me
comfortable.
ask you this with the common good, because you mentioned about family, and how they will always, kind of be there to support you. Um, what with the common good, is there like a balance? Because families can be partial. I mean, they're going to look out, love you for whatever,
Yeah.
but sometimes you need to just get that real stark reality check from someone that's going to give it to you honestly. Is that so? I don't. I'm trying to like the approach, or like if you
Call it
are, yeah,
the hard love sort of thing, or like the
yeah,
stern love, and like
yeah,
yeah. I've never had that situation. Now, granted, I also haven't, thankfully, have not been in trouble with the law since coming
there
home.
you go.
So I guess I wouldn't have had a reason to have kind of a spanking, if you will. I don't know for other people. I do know there have been some people who have gotten into a little bit of trouble, multitude of reasons. I don't really know the full story. Obviously, it wasn't any of my business.
Yeah,
I would imagine there is some talking to there. Like, hey, love you to death. Kind of get your head out of
yeah,
get your
yeah.
head out of the gutter kind of thing. And I know that Common Good, they've done what they can to help in whatever way they can.
Mhm.
Um, for me, kind of why I say family more so again,
Mhm.
because again, they always have social events. But even I think the one that really got me was they're the only reason why I'm in Kennesaw State right now. So when I put in that application, kind of saw they just kind of forgot about it. Like quite literally, they forgot about it. My application at the bottom of a stack, and I hadn't heard anything. I reached out, called, nothing, and then eventually, Dr. Higginbotham, who started Common Good, she
Mhm.
asked me, and she's like, "How's it going? Like, do you need any help?" And I'm like, "I don't know. No one's responded." And
Right.
she called up one of the professors who actually worked for Common Good, who knew the admissions, but like it was just kind of this weird connection point. And eventually they're like, "Oh yeah," pulled it, put it on the top, accepted it, and that was literally the only reason. They were about to
Wow.
apparently they're about to dead dock my application to say, "Oh, sorry, it's been too late," and just kind of
Yeah.
shoot me on out the door. So
Yeah. So
that,
for the guys that are listening, I mean, having resources that can help you or put you in a good position is critical to your success. I
yes,
mean, you have to have resources and have the willingness to ask. Or in your situation, you had someone that to ask you, like,
yeah,
how's it going?
yeah,
And you were able to even speak on it. A lot of
yeah,
people fresh out, sometimes they'll dismiss it, like, oh, it wasn't going to happen for me. They may get that sour patch attitude, like, oh,
yeah,
I kind of figured this was going to happen.
yeah,
So you have
yeah.
to be vulnerable enough to open up and say, hey, I really don't know what I need to do.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Mm.
that's exactly right. Because again, I was in that same exact boat where I was about to toss up my hands and like, yeah, whatever. They're like, I knew this was going to happen. Long shot anyway. I don't even care. And then she asked, and I'm like, okay. And that was the only reason. Quite literally, that conversation is the only reason why I ended up in school, because a lot of it was just, same thing where you're like, oh, I know they're not going to accept me anyway. It's because I have a record and I was in prison. Just a little bit of that sour patch attitude. And I'll humble myself enough to be like, yeah, no, I definitely had that.
Yeah,
Especially after I got uh, they dismissed me off the first application to the other school, and I was like, yeah, here we go,
yeah,
same stuff, different
yeah.
toilet.
One of the things we used to talk about in some of the classes I was in was the fear of success. Criminals at some point they have a fear of success because they just don't think they deserve it.
Yeah,
It's kind of based in like self-esteem type stuff, but that's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother
real
show.
thing. Man. It is a real thing. Yeah,
Right. All right. So before we close today, Michael, I want to hit you with some rapid fire redemption questions. Okay. Just say the first thing that comes to mind. It's going to be real, pretty much off the top. You ready?
okay.
All right. What's the first thing you did for yourself after coming home?
I did buy myself, I won't say not myself, I did buy a car. It was my dad's old car. So I guess kind of, it wasn't like a luxury, but yeah, I'd say bought that, with the money I'd saved up from the TC. So
Yeah,
it
you
wasn't
bought
necessarily,
yourself a car?
yeah, it wasn't necessarily like the glamorous, like, oh, I bought myself a new watch or anything. It was
Mm.
nice. The first actually big thing I purchased. So yeah, we'll stick with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a necessity too. We needed
Yeah.
that car.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Here's the next one. One thing that prison taught you that you didn't expect.
The value of humility, of being humble, that is a priceless, and respect too. Kind of that very much goes hand in hand. There is a lot to be said about how prison teaches you very much. Be humble and be respectful. Like,
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. That's a great answer. Humility. That's just crazy. I thought about it. I was like, that was a pretty good answer myself because I probably said the same thing
yeah.
after some thinking. Now, if there was one book that you read, what was the book that really changed your thinking?
It's funny. This one I read, and I still have a copy of it. Probably it's my
Oh
phone
man.
around here somewhere. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That was
Oh.
one of the first books I read, probably within the first like 6 months of getting out. So, a little background and why it's very relevant, why I would recommend it to anybody, especially if you're in prison or anybody, even if you're not in prison. Like, it is a great book. The guy was a Auschwitz survivor, and
Mhm.
he's a psychologist, and he kind of developed his own branch of psychology that really brings to question the meaning that you can derive from your struggles, from your struggling. And that,
Mhm.
having read that so early on, I'm confident in more ways than I could possibly imagine that helped shape kind of my trajectory
Mhm.
throughout my time in prison. That would
Awesome.
be probably top of my list.
Okay. And this is the last one. I want you to finish this sentence for me. Redemption is go.
Necessary only if it's been earned.
Okay. 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 I like that. I like the little twist you put on that at the end. All right. Michael, your voice Michael, your voice matters not just because of what you've survived, but because of the way you've bounced back and you choose to give back, right? Helping even now working with the Common Good as a member after actually graduating. That's a testament to the fortitude and consistency that we want to highlight on the Conviction Fiction. Now, to anyone listening who thinks you're alone, you're not. Okay. We hope this episode gave you something real to hold on to. You can always follow Conviction Fiction on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, all those little social media platforms. We're not looking for likes. We're looking for changing lives. And if you have a story to tell, Michael reminded us today that freedom isn't a finish line. It's a definite process. Okay, one step at a time, one decision at a time. Take your time. And as long as you're breathing, you still have the power to shift the narrative. Now, I want to thank you again, Michael. Any closing thoughts or comments about your experience with the Common Good? Give them how would someone get in touch with the Common Good if they were looking to enroll?
Yeah, great question. So we do have a website. I'm assuming it's just Common Good of Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
assuming.com. But if nothing else, reach out to me. I can
Mm-hmm.
give you my information, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that, and I know we have a Instagram presence and Facebook presence, if I'm not mistaken. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't think we're on TikTok.
I'll be sure I'll have all of the links
Yeah.
for the Common Good. I went on there and I saw like a picture. I'm like, there's the guy I'm going to interview. I had to research a little bit, right? And I was like, hey, he's like an actual member. I thought he was a student because I had a guy on yesterday, Friday. He graduated from the Common Good also, or he went through the program. CJ Tarter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I talked with him the other day. His episode just dropped. So again, thanks again for joining the show. I want you to hang out just a little bit after this.
Yeah.
And we'll guys, hey, look, the Conviction Fiction, you know where to come if you want to get real raw stories, inspiring stories for those individuals that are returning home. I want to thank you again for joining and see you next week.